Aloha, welcome to Your Brain Matters. I'm Dr. Kore Liow, your host and neurologist. Today, we're going to talk about how nutrition, eating right, could slow memory loss. And we're going to talk about a very important topic, which is Alzheimer's dementia and what we can do about it. With me in the studio here is, let me introduce Dr. Steve Blake and Catherine Blake.
Thank you, Dr. Liow.
Thank you for being in the studio with us.
Thank you.
Dr. Blake, Alzheimer's dementia is the sixth leading cause of death in the United States, and it affects 1 in 8 seniors over 65 years old and 1 in 3 over 85 years old. Every 69 seconds, somebody is affected by Alzheimer's dementia. So this is a really important topic. How did you get interested in nutrition and memory loss and Alzheimer's dementia?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but I found that Alzheimer's disease, as you've mentioned in your lectures, is one that modern medicine is not as effective in curing as many of the other leading diseases. So I thought that a different approach would be helpful. So I started looking at nutrition, at diet, looking at different nutrients, and finding solutions that maybe won't become a drug, but can still help people to combat dementia, perhaps not cure it, but at least slow the growth of dementia, perhaps slow it until we're 100 years old, and then no problem.
So let's be very clear. Not everyone that has memory loss has Alzheimer's dementia, but it is a memory loss could just be a sign of normal aging. And but at the other end of the spectrum is Alzheimer's dementia, where patient's brain truly being affected by a severe neurological condition. Explain to us, Dr. Blake, what is Alzheimer's dementia and what happens to the brain in Alzheimer's dementia?
Okay, yes, as you say, there are different forms of dementia, such as vascular dementia, where you have the arteries clogged up in the brain. But with Alzheimer's dementia, the two signature features are the amyloid plaques, sometimes called Alzheimer's plaques or senile plaques, and also the tau tangles, which doctors call hyperphosphorylated tau. But we just call them tau tangles. It's protein inside the nerve cells of the brain that have become ineffective. And it causes the brain nerves to shrivel up, lose connections, and then you can't think, you can't remember. So Alzheimer's disease is beyond normal aging. It's worse, it's deeper. And a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease should be taken carefully with neuropsychological testing. And once it's determined, it can vary between very mild or very advanced Alzheimer's disease.
So let me get this right. Alzheimer's is deposits of these abnormal proteins in the brain.
Yes.
And it's not part of normal aging, and should be diagnosed early. Let me ask Catherine here.
Yes.
Catherine, thank you so much for being on the show with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Liow.
Tell us about, how did you, tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do and how did you get into nutrition and cooking?
I've been studying food and its effect on health for over 40 years. I've been studying it, studied at Cornell, and I continue to learn ongoing all the time. One of my special interests has been helping people with nutrition and finding how it has helped everyone who indulges in it. One of the things that I'd like to say about the Alzheimer's is that there are certain antioxidants, one of them being glutathione peroxidase, which is specifically useful in protecting the hippocampus, which is the memory center, one of the memory centers of the brain. Now, bringing that home to the kitchen, that's my specialty, is how to bring this information home. And Brazil nuts, we need 55 micrograms of selenium.
So before we get into the details of that, no, not at all. This is amazing that, you know, that not only there are medications, you know, that we're focused on making early diagnosis, early detection when something is abnormal with a protein deposit in the brain, but there are things that we can do in our daily lives, like what you are working with the Alzheimer's patient to change the diet.
That's exactly right.
How long have you been working with trying to modify the nutrition or the diet of Alzheimer's patients?
For about 1 year. I've been working with the Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial and at Hawaii Pacific Neuroscience with my husband Steve, and we've been seeing patients, and it's been very rewarding. Many of them have made some changes and they are feeling better. It's very exciting.
Oh, wonderful. We're so happy that you're part of this process in helping out dementia patients. Back to you, Dr. Blake. So it's important to make the diagnosis early, and how do they know that if there's a plaque in the brain? Is there tests that they do, a medical test that they do?
Yes, primarily it's the neuropsychological testing where you might be asked to draw a clock, answer questions. Some are very simple questions. What did you have for breakfast yesterday? And then if people get tripped up, they go into a deeper psychological testing, either R-bands or ADAS-Cog, which take a bit of time. And our neuropsychologists can then determine exactly what parts of the brain are having problems. Also, there's imaging, such as volumetric MRI, which is very useful to see, because in Alzheimer's disease, we may see that the brain shrinks during the course of the disease down to half of its size. This shrinkage is caused by the dying off of brain nerve cells called neurons.
So it's really important to get the test done, not just sit around and wait for the memory to decline. We should get the memory test done, the MRI, like you said, so it's important to get to your doctors early. And yes. Catherine, I understand there's not a cure for Alzheimer's, even as common and as important condition this is. And there are medications that I treat my patients with, and these medications may slow the progression, slow the buildup of this abnormal plaques in the brain. But even then, we find that patients do progress in their memory loss, patients with Alzheimer's. But you have been using nutrition to try to slow the course of the memory loss in these patients.
Yes.
And Dr. Blake, share some of your, what are some of the scientific data to support that nutrition, changing the nutrition could change the chemistry in the brain. What are some of the scientific data?
Well, first of all, a study came out this year on the MIND diet, which is a modification of the Mediterranean diet. And they found that with really just 4 of the 15 changes that we're recommending, people were getting a 7.5-year delay in dementia. And that's what we want. We mostly work with mild cognitive impairment patients, and this is before dementia, but it's a little more memory loss than a normal aging would experience. So what we want to do is stop those people from progressing into dementia if at all possible. That's our goal. And we have targeted nutrition many different ways.
So you mentioned Mediterranean diet. Explain what is a Mediterranean diet?
The parts of the Mediterranean diet that are really useful, that were used in this study, were very simple. More green vegetables, more berries, less animal fats, and they also had people eating basically more of plant-based diet and less of animal products. And this made a huge difference.
When you say plant-based diet, is it strictly vegetarian? Are we talking about vegan, or can they have meat? I mean, I like to have my meat occasionally, or is it strictly vegan?
No, that's a very good question, because in our Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial, we've designed it so that people want to keep their saturated fats down, not none, but down to a reasonable level. The American Heart Association and other government agencies agree under 7% of calories is good. That's under 17 grams per day of saturated fat. Now, to achieve that, you can still, for instance, a cup of chicken cubes would be about 4 grams of saturated fat. So if you had that 3 times a day, you would not go over your saturated fat limit.
So the audience understands saturated fat comes from animal products. So reducing the consumption of meat will reduce the amount of saturated fat in our diet.
And it's interesting because there's 2 separate mechanisms that help the brain by lowering saturated fat in the diet. One is because the saturated fat increases the clogging of the arteries through cholesterol and other mechanisms. When the arteries are clogged in the brain, you can get transient ischemic attacks, little tiny strokes that kill little tiny parts of the brain, and this is part of memory loss. Vascular dementia is a huge part of memory loss and very common in Alzheimer's patients. So by reducing saturated fat, you can reduce vascular dementia, and that gets more blood flow to the brain, which is what we want.
You know, we have always known that nutrition, eating right, Catherine, is good for the heart, but this is, it appears that what's good for the heart is also good for the brain.
It's the same thing. Clogged arteries in the heart cause a heart attack. Clogged arteries in the brain can cause a brain attack, known as a stroke, or can cause an aggravation. Now, the second way that reducing saturated fats reduce blood cholesterol. We all know they're tied together. So our blood cholesterol goes up when we eat a big steak, and it goes up a lot less when we eat a little chicken, and doesn't go up at all if we eat some, vegetables. When the cholesterol goes up, the genes that make the amyloid plaque, that make the enzymes that make the amyloid plaque, are suppressed. They're quenched. This is an interesting epigenetic quenching of the genes. So even if you are genetically susceptible.
So without getting too scientific,
Okay.
And we want, without getting, I like Italian food and I like Greek food. When you mention Mediterranean diet, when I'm having my Italian food, is that a good thing as opposed to having, fish and chips? I mean, when you say Mediterranean diet, what do I add olive oil? Do I change my regular cooking oil to olive oil, or what?
Those are big questions. I'm not saying that the Mediterranean diet is the best diet. It is much better than the American diet, but then what isn't? Because the typical American diet is not very healthy. We all know a lot of animal fat, a lot of junk food. This is not a healthy diet, and this is for sure contributing to the epidemic of Alzheimer's disease. Is number 6 killer, as you mentioned.
Oh, Catherine is about to say something. Go ahead.
I'd like to say that 6 olives only adds up to less than 1 gram of saturated fat. So in choosing a diet from Greece or Italy, you could use the olives instead of the olive oil, and you're a couple of steps ahead that way.
So eating olives are good. And I'm hearing eating berries are good, olives are good, plant-based diet are good. And so let's go to Catherine now. How do we translate all this information and scientific studies? How do we make it into day-to-day practical? You are the expert. So Catherine, take us through so I'm convinced from hearing Dr. Blake that I need to watch what I eat, because it not only affects my heart, it affects my brain, but when it really comes to day-to-day eating, I mean, let's start at grocery shopping. What kind of habits should we change in the food?
Very good question, Dr. Liow. First of all, you might want to reduce cheese, because cheese is very high in saturated fat. 2 slices of cheddar cheese has 10 grams. So you're already almost at your day's total of 17 grams. One way to do that would be to alternate what you're using for toppings and to flavor your foods. One fun idea would be red bell peppers. You could mix those with cashews and stir fry them a little bit and put them on top of anything. I call this recipe best friends. Now the red bell peppers, 1 cup of them have 185 milligrams of vitamin C. So you're getting an extra benefit of cleaning out the system with the vitamin C in the mineral ascorbate form that it's found in nature. So basically, the trick is to discover new toppings. Another topping that might be a good idea would be almonds. You could take some almonds, put them in a blender, perhaps toasted or raw, and then have them be a topping on your spaghetti, for example, instead of a cheese sauce. So reducing the cheese would be a wonderful start. I have a recipe for a pesto that has no cheese. You don't really need the cheese. You can use the basil, the garlic, maybe some sesame tahini, and a little salt and pepper, and some water, and you're good to go. So there are different recipes that you can learn.
So wow, I am impressed with how you can make something so simple like almond and red bell peppers into something so delicious. It sounds good already to me.
It's good.
Is this so? If we're
Don't
going to
forget your
change
avocados.
the things that we buy, can this be accomplished by shopping at Safeway, or do we need to go to a specialty store?
I think you could go to any store and find fruits and vegetables. Avocados make a nice meat substitute. You could put them with beans on a dinner plate, and the beans will be very filling and very low in saturated fat. And the avocado, only 3 grams for this whole thing of saturated fat. The beans, under 1 gram of saturated fat for a whole serving, a cup. So if you're trying to reduce saturated fats to clear your arteries to help your brain, then this is a good direction to go in.
Obviously, a word for our audience is to check, make sure you don't have any food allergies, trying out new foods, and even if there's any questions, check with your doctors, before taking on new food, and nutrition. I see you have something else there too. Is that?
Yes, we have sunflower seeds here, which are very high in vitamin E. They're wonderful foods. 2 tablespoons is 6.6 milligrams of vitamin E, thank you. And we need 15 milligrams per day. So 3 tablespoons, 4 tablespoons of sunflower seeds, you're just about there for your vitamin E for the day. And that's something a lot of people are not getting enough of on a daily basis.
And 93% of Americans don't get the bare minimum of vitamin E. And this is very much related to the death of brain cells and the advance of Alzheimer's disease.
Amazing you said that, because once upon a time, I as neurologists, we actually prescribe vitamin E for patients with dementia, but that studies sort of fade out and we stop. But this can actually be accomplished by just simply changing the diet. Besides sunflower seeds, what else are good sources of vitamin E?
Well, walnuts are probably the best source because they have the gamma-tocopherol type of vitamin E. And we recommend in our Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial an ounce of walnuts. And as you mentioned, some older people may have stomach problems. And so better absorption and easier digestion, we recommend the walnuts be either ground up in a coffee grinder or put into a blender to make a topping. Catherine has a recipe, creamy walnut dressing. It's excellent. And that way you not only get the walnuts, but any vegetables you pour it on, you're sure to eat them as well.
Wow, I'm getting very good ideas about how this cooking can really change. And may I ask if there's a formula, a cookbook that you use that we can go to your email to obtain?
I have a recipe book called Healthy Recipes for Friends. It's all 0 cholesterol, very low saturated fat, so it would be helpful to people who are looking to have less saturated fats in their diet. I have another cookbook, Recipes for a Strong Mind, which I am donating to the Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial participants, and that is specifically focused towards foods that are low in saturated fat, high in vitamin E, and high in antioxidants to help prevent buildup of amyloid plaques in the brain.
How do they get a hold of these books? Are they on?
Would you like to tell the website? Or
well, you can email us at drsteveblake.com, drsteveblake@gmail.com, or our website is also drsteveblake.com.
drblake.com.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Now, you've been talking about the clinical trial that you're doing,
yes.
And tell me, how did you thought about this clinical trial and Alzheimer's, and tell us a little bit, take us on that journey.
I was giving a lecture on Alzheimer's disease at Castle Medical Center, and this famous neurologist came in before the lecture and asked me about my talk. And he was very much in demand. His beeper, his cell phone were going off constantly, and it seemed like we couldn't talk for long. But he quizzed me for 45 minutes on my approach to Alzheimer's disease, verifying each step along the way what made good scientific sense. And at the end, he proposed to me that I should design a trial, a clinical trial, scientific trial, in order to test this multifaceted nutritional intervention. And of course, we know who that doctor was. It's Dr. Liow,
Wow.
Chair of Medicine at Castle Medical Center.
Well, no, it is truly our honor to be working with you, Dr. Blake. Tell us, what does this trial involve, and what kind of patients are you looking for?
Well, we're accepting patients with mild cognitive impairment. Which
Now, what is mild cognitive impairment?
That's between dementia and normal aging forgetfulness, and it's best to have it checked. If you're getting forgetful, as you mentioned, it's very important to see where you are on the continuum so that you can catch things early. Because you want to catch the brain. Maybe if you're just diagnosed at mild cognitive impairment, your brain may be only 10%.
So this is a patient, not dementia yet, but just having memory loss.
Memory loss.
And they are the people that you're looking for to enroll into these clinical trials. And tell us, what does the clinical trials involve? Does it involve changing the diet? Are they taking supplements?
We have 3 groups, and because it's science-based, we have randomized people into the 3 groups. One group, control, no change. Another group, just supplements, but we have a beautiful supplement schedule that will really boost the antioxidant power and slow down the buildup of amyloid plaques, and it's carefully targeted to work. The third group's the most powerful because we're putting together diet and supplements together. So you're getting your vitamin E from walnuts and sunflower seeds, but you're also getting your vitamin E from a special gamma tocopherol pill, very carefully chosen, not like the usual ones on the market.
Wonderful. How long does this trial go on for?
It's a 1-year trial. There will be a 6-month follow-up, and would be very happy if people would join the trial. You do get free supplements if you're in one of the 2 groups, or 2 of the 3 groups. And
how do they find out more information on this trial? Can be obtained from our website at hawaiineuroscience.com.
Yes.
Or on Dr. Steve Blake at .com, Dr. Steve Blake's website as well.
Yes.
Or at the number 808-261-4476. Let me go back to Catherine here.
Yes.
Catherine, you, I can see that you are an expert at changing people's diet, you know, and making food that tastes bland, wonderful, you know. What, if you could say one thing to the people out there that are just trying to do the right thing, eating right, but sort of kind of perhaps not wanting to do so because they just couldn't, they just wanted the good food. And what would you tell them?
I would say be patient with yourself, my friends. It takes time to make changes, and the changes have to come from within, and that takes learning and some trial and error. I would also encourage them to remember that they are worthy of caring for themselves as well as they would care for their children or a beloved pet. Sometimes we forget to care for ourselves when we're so willing to care for others in our lives. So I would remind them that they are worthy of really taking the best care of themselves that they possibly can.
Good word of advice. You can't care for other people if you don't care for yourself.
Yes.
And we thank you so much for taking the time
Thank
to
you.
come and talk to us.
It's
And
an honor, Dr. Liow.
Dr. Steve Blake, and we thank you also. Any last word of advice for our audience?
More fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, lots of beans. That's my advice, and that's what I eat.
Wow. Well, we thank you so much for the work that you do to improve people's lives, and for the science that you do, for the studies that you do to contribute to not just the neurology community. I understand that you are also into other medical conditions, and more to come from Dr. Blake. Our time is up. We want to thank you for watching Your Brain Matters. Tune in next time when Dr. Blake and Catherine will be back to talk to us about stroke and nutrition and how to reduce your stroke risk. Until next time, Your Brain Matters. Aloha.